Imagine setting out on a peaceful hike with friends, only to stumble upon something that would forever change your lives. A group of hikers, in what was supposed to be an ordinary day out in the forest, made a discovery that turned their adventure into a nightmare. Deep in the woods, they found a hidden bunker, buried in dirt and leaves. And what they uncovered inside was more horrifying than anything they could have imagined. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our real-life mysteries and shocking discoveries. Trust me, this is one story you'll want to follow all the way to the end. It was a warm Saturday morning when four friends, Tom, Sarah, Alex, and Emma, met up for a hike they had planned weeks in advance. They were nature lovers, city dwellers who spent their weekends exploring trails, finding hidden waterfalls, and just getting away from the concrete jungle. This weekend, they decided to try a trail that was less traveled, a forested path just outside their usual hiking spots. They'd heard rumors of old military bunkers hidden in these woods from decades ago, but never really believed it. To them, it sounded like an urban legend. The hike began like any other. The group chatted, laughed, and took in the beauty of their surroundings. Towering trees stretched up toward the sky, the morning sunlight filtering through leaves, casting patterns on the ground as they walked. They lost track of time, following winding paths deeper and deeper into the forest, feeling that sense of calm that only nature could bring. But about an hour into the hike, something odd caught Tom's eye. He noticed what looked like a worn-out path that veered off the main trail, hidden partially by overgrown bushes. It seemed strange, but it piqued his curiosity. Tom stopped and pointed it out to the others, suggesting they check it out. They were all feeling adventurous, and this new path seemed to be calling to them. So, they left the marked trail and pushed through the undergrowth, their excitement building as they ventured into unfamiliar territory. As they moved further down the narrow path, the forest grew denser, darker. The sounds of birds faded, and a strange, almost eerie silence settled over them. The air felt colder, heavier, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. After walking for about 20 minutes, Alex suddenly stopped in his tracks. He'd seen something partially hidden beneath some leaves and branches. The group gathered around, brushing away the foliage, and what they saw left them speechless. A rusted metal door, barely visible under the dirt and overgrowth, with a heavy, almost industrial-looking handle. It was unlike anything they had seen before. Emma, who was always the cautious one, voiced her concerns. She pointed out that it looked old and dangerous, maybe even unstable, but Tom's curiosity was stronger than his caution. "We came this far, right?" he said with a grin. They all stood around the door, a mixture of excitement and apprehension filling the air. Who had put this bunker here? And more importantly, what was inside? They hesitated for a moment, exchanging nervous glances. But finally Tom, with a little encouragement from Alex, grabbed the handle and gave it a firm pull. The door didn't budge at first, but after several attempts, it opened with a loud, grating sound, as if it hadn't been moved in years. A foul smell wafted up from the darkness below, causing them all to step back and cover their noses. The smell was intense, a mix of dampness, rot, and something else they couldn't quite place. But despite the stench, curiosity got the better of them. They took out their flashlights and shined them down the opening. A narrow set of metal steps led down into a dark corridor that seemed to go on forever. None of them wanted to be the first one down. But Tom, being the unofficial leader of the group, decided to go ahead. "Just a quick look," he assured them, trying to hide his own nervousness. One by one, they carefully made their way down the rusty steps, their flashlights illuminating the damp, mold-covered walls. The air grew colder as they descended, and the silence was so profound that each footstep echoed. At the bottom, they found themselves in a narrow corridor with concrete walls and a low ceiling. It looked like something out of an old war movie, almost as if time had forgotten this place. The group moved slowly, trying to stay as quiet as possible. As they continued down the corridor, they noticed small rooms on either side, some with doors that were slightly ajar, others completely closed. They peeked into one of the rooms and saw nothing but broken furniture, old metal shelves, and scattered papers, faded and crumbling with age. Whatever purpose this bunker once served, it was clear it had been abandoned for a long time. They were about to turn back when Sarah, who was shining her flashlight into one of the rooms, suddenly gasped. The others rushed over, their flashlights following hers, and that's when they saw it. A small mattress on the floor, barely more than a thin piece of foam, covered with a filthy blanket. Next to it was an empty can of food and a plastic cup. It looked like someone had been living here, though how recently they couldn't tell. Their hearts pounded as they realized they might not be alone. Emma suggested they leave immediately, but Tom insisted they check the rest of the bunker. Something didn't feel right, and he had a gut feeling that they needed to find out who or what had been here. Reluctantly, the others agreed, and they moved deeper into the bunker, now even more cautious than before. As they moved further down the corridor, they noticed scratch marks on the walls, as if someone had clawed at the concrete. Some marks were faint, others deeper, as if whoever made them had been desperate, perhaps even terrified. The air was thick with dread, and every shadow seemed to hold a dark secret. Then, in the dim glow of their flashlights, they saw another door at the end of the hallway, heavier than the others, with a metal latch that seemed newer, as if it had been replaced recently. The group hesitated, feeling a chill run down their spines. Emma urged them to leave, her instincts screaming that they were walking into something far beyond their understanding. But Tom, unable to shake his curiosity, reached out and unlatched the door. As the door creaked open, the foul smell intensified, almost overpowering them. Inside, they saw a small room, no bigger than a closet, and in the middle of that room was something they would never forget. A young girl, no older than 10, curled up on the floor. She was thin, her clothes filthy and torn, her hair matted and tangled. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, and her eyes, wide with fear, looked up at them as if they were the first people she'd seen in months. The group was frozen in shock, trying to process what they were seeing. The girl stared at them, her expression a mixture of terror and desperation. She was clutching a small can of food, so rusted it was barely recognizable, and beside her was a plastic bottle with only a few drops of water left. Alex broke the silence, his voice barely a whisper. "Oh my God, how long has she been here?" The girl looked at them, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper, and each word seemed to take every ounce of strength she had left. "Help, please," she managed to say, her voice breaking. Without thinking, Sarah rushed forward, kneeling beside the girl and wrapping her arms around her. She could feel the girl's bones beneath her thin frame, her body cold to the touch. "It's okay," Sarah whispered, trying to hold back her own tears. We're here now. You're safe." The group scrambled to gather their thoughts, unsure of what to do next. Emma took out her phone, trying to get a signal, but deep underground, there was no chance. They knew they had to get her out of there, but as they prepared to leave, the girl grabbed Sarah's arm with surprising strength. Her eyes filled with fear as she whispered, "He's coming back." The word sent chills through all of them. Who was he, and what had he done to this girl? The girl's words echoed through the cold, dark corridor, sending a wave of dread through the group. "He's coming back." Those words held a terror that none of them could fully comprehend, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. The hikers exchanged glances, their excitement and curiosity now replaced by a deep, primal fear. Tom was the first to break the silence. "We can't stay here. We need to get her out, now." They quickly formed a plan, with Sarah carefully helping the girl to her feet. She was so weak, she could barely stand, her legs trembling as if they hadn't been used in weeks. They moved as quickly and quietly as they could, supporting her with each step as they made their way back down the dim, musty corridor toward the ladder that would lead them out of the bunker. But as they approached the ladder, a metallic clank echoed from somewhere within the bunker. The sound was faint, but unmistakable, like metal scraping against metal. The group froze, hearts pounding as they listened intently. Tom turned, his voice barely a whisper. "Did you guys hear that?" Everyone nodded, their faces pale. The girl's eyes widened with fear, her grip on Sarah's arm tightening as she whispered, "It's him. He's coming." The hikers were now faced with a terrifying choice. Try to leave through the entrance and risk encountering whoever he was, or retreat deeper into the bunker in hopes of finding another way out. Tom's mind raced, but every second counted. He made a split-second decision. Everyone. Back into the corridor. Maybe there's another exit down here. The group moved quickly but quietly, guiding the girl along with them. Her breath was shallow, and she stumbled, clearly exhausted. But they didn't have the luxury to slow down. As they retreated further into the bunker, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. They passed the rooms they'd explored earlier, each one as empty and eerie as before. The corridors seemed endless, the oppressive silence only broken by the occasional faint clink of metal from somewhere behind them. Finally, they reached another door at the end of a side hallway. This one was heavier, with a strange lock that looked newer than the others. Tom tried the handle, but it was locked tight. He tugged harder, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me try," Alex said, pulling a small pocket knife from his backpack. He worked at the lock, his hands shaking as he tried to force it open. Every second felt like an eternity, and with each passing moment, the clinking sounds grew closer. Finally, with a satisfying click, the lock gave way and the door creaked open. The room beyond was small and cramped, with a single dim light bulb flickering overhead. They all hurried inside, closing the door behind them as quietly as possible. The group huddled in silence, each one holding their breath, listening for any signs of movement outside. The girl clung to Sarah, her thin frame trembling as she whispered, "Please, don't let him take me back." Sarah held her close, her heart aching as she whispered back, "You're safe with us. We won't let him take you." Minutes passed, and for a moment, it seemed as if whoever was in the bunker might have left. The clinking sound faded, replaced once again by the eerie silence that filled the entire place. Tom exhaled, relief washing over him as he whispered, "I think we're okay. Let's give it a few more minutes and then make our way back out." But just as he spoke, footsteps echoed outside the door, slow, deliberate footsteps, getting closer with each step. The group froze, their hearts pounding as they watched the door, terrified of who or what might be on the other side. The footsteps stopped right outside. A heavy, rasping breath could be heard, as if someone or something was standing just inches away. Then, the doorknob began to turn. Sarah stifled a gasp, her grip tightening on the girl as they all watched in horror, waiting for the door to open. But then, just as quickly as it started, the doorknob stopped turning, and the footsteps moved away. They waited in silence until the footsteps had faded completely. After several long, agonizing moments, Tom whispered, "We have to go now." They quietly opened the door, peering into the corridor to make sure it was clear. The coast seemed clear, so they moved quickly, retracing their steps toward the entrance ladder. Every sound, every shadow seemed to hold a threat, but they pressed on, desperate to escape the bunker and get the girl to safety. Finally, they reached the ladder. Tom went up first, poking his head out of the bunker to check if anyone was around. The forest was silent, the trees swaying gently in the wind. He signaled for the others to follow, and one by one, they climbed out into the fresh air. Once they were all outside, they helped the girl out of the bunker, shielding her eyes as she squinted in the bright sunlight. For the first time in months, she felt the warmth of the sun on her face, and a small smile crept across her lips as she breathed in the fresh air. But their relief was short-lived. As they helped her to her feet, a figure emerged from the trees nearby, a tall, thin man with a pale face and hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through them. His clothes were dirty, his hands calloused, and he wore an expression that sent chills down their spines. Tom stepped forward, shielding the group as he called out, "Who are you? What do you want?" The man's gaze fell on the girl, his lips curling into a twisted smile. "She belongs to me," he said in a voice so cold it seemed to freeze the very air around them. "You have no idea what you're getting yourselves into." Without another word, the man turned and disappeared back into the forest, leaving the group in stunned silence. They didn't wait to find out if he would come back. Supporting the girl between them, they quickly made their way back to the main trail, moving as fast as they could. They brought the girl to the nearest hospital, where doctors confirmed she was severely malnourished and dehydrated, but, thankfully, expected to recover. She was placed in protective custody, while law enforcement opened an investigation into her captivity. She told authorities what little she could remember. She had been taken from a nearby town months ago, kept in the bunker by the strange man who had fed her only enough to keep her alive. The news of her rescue spread quickly, and her story captured the nation's attention. Many questions remained unanswered, especially about the man who had kept her captive and the existence of the hidden bunker. Authorities searched the area, but were unable to locate the man, leaving the forest's secrets buried for now. The hikers tried to return to their normal lives, but they knew they'd never forget that day in the forest. The image of the girl's haunted eyes, the coldness in the man's voice, and the terrifying mystery of the bunker would stay with them forever. As they watched her reunite with her family on the news, each of them knew they had done something important. They had saved a life, brought a child back from a living nightmare. And though the shadows of the forest still haunted them, they knew they would carry this story with them, a reminder of both the darkness they had encountered and the courage they had found to face it.